Hey everyone, welcome to this deep dive all about how to totally rock that toxicologist interview. We're going to be using RoleCatcher's amazing resources to get you prepped and ready to just knock their socks off. We'll be diving deep into some seriously tricky interview questions they've gathered and sprinkling in some super valuable insights from their career guide. So, are you ready to unlock that dream toxicology career? Let's dive right in.
Let's do it. RoleCatcher has pulled together so much great info. It's amazing.
Right. So first things first, I think we should make sure we're all on the same page about what a toxicologist actually does. I was looking through the RoleCatcher overview, and it seems like this role is so much more than just like
Yeah,
working in a lab.
it is. It really is a fascinating blend of science research and real-world problem solving. So essentially, toxicologists are like the detectives of the chemical world. They investigate how all sorts of substances impact living things and the environment, like chemicals, biological agents, even physical things like radiation. It's about figuring out the cause and effect and then using that knowledge to actually make things safer for everyone.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. So it's not just about identifying poisons then, right? It's about understanding the whole picture of how these substances interact with everything.
Exactly. And because of that, toxicologists can work in all sorts of different places, labs, out in the field, even for government agencies, helping to create regulations to keep us all safe.
Wow. It's way more diverse than I thought initially. So, okay, let's say you've applied for this toxicologist position and you've landed an interview. RoleCatcher has put together 9 common interview questions. And honestly, some of these are pretty tough, but they also have this awesome insights section where they break down what the interviewer is really looking for with each one. So, are you ready to tackle some of these head on?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
All right, let's start with question 1. Can you describe your experience with toxicology studies? This one seems pretty straightforward on the surface, but what are they really trying to gauge here?
Well, it's all about gauging the depth and relevance of your experience. They're not just looking for a list of every study you've ever touched. They want to see if you can connect your past work to the specific requirements of this particular role.
Okay, so how do you make that connection really clear in your answer?
It's all about focus. Focus on the experiences that really align with what they're looking for in the job description. So for example, let's say the job emphasizes environmental toxicology. You'd want to highlight any studies you've done related to environmental pollutants, or risk assessments, or the effects of pesticides on wildlife, things like that. It's all about showing that you've not only studied toxicology, but that you've actually applied that knowledge in practical ways.
Right, that's a great point. So it's about tailoring your answer to show that your past experience really relates to the specific challenges of this job.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to go beyond just describing the study itself. Talk about the specific techniques you used, the challenges you faced, the outcomes you achieved. Did you develop a new analytical method? Did you present your findings at a conference? Those kinds of details really add depth and make your experience come alive for the interviewer.
That's really helpful advice. It's like painting a picture of your skills and accomplishments.
Yeah.
I know RoleCatcher also has this awesome AI feature that can actually help tailor responses for specific job roles.
Yeah.
How does that work exactly?
It's pretty incredible. What it does is it analyzes the job description and then suggests specific keywords and phrases that you can actually weave into your answers. So for example, if the job description really emphasizes analytical chemistry, the AI might suggest mentioning specific techniques, like gas chromatography mass spectrometry, which would highlight your expertise in that area.
So it's not just about giving you a generic answer then. It's about helping you customize your response to make the best possible impression for that particular role.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just keywords. The AI can also give you feedback on the structure and flow of your answer, making sure that it's clear, concise, and compelling.
Wow, that sounds like a real game changer for interview prep. Okay, ready to tackle question 2?
Bring it on.
All right. This one's all about staying current. How do you stay up to date with the latest developments in toxicology? Now, I know it's not enough to just say, I read journals. So what's the best way to approach this question?
This is your chance to show off your passion and your commitment to the field. It's about showing that you're a lifelong learner who's actively seeking out new knowledge and staying ahead of the curve.
Okay, so what are some specific things you could mention to really impress the interviewer?
Well, instead of just naming journals, talk about specific articles or studies that have really grabbed your attention recently. For example, you could say, I recently read this fascinating study in toxicological sciences about the impact of microplastics on marine ecosystems. The findings were really eye-opening and have made me think more critically about the long-term consequences of plastic pollution.
Ah, so it's about showing that you're not just passively reading,
Right.
but that you're actually engaging with the latest research
Hmm.
and thinking about its implications.
Exactly. You can also mention professional organizations you're a member of, like the Society of Toxicology, and highlight any conferences or webinars you've attended, for example. You could say, I recently attended the SOT annual meeting and learned about cutting-edge research on using CRISPR technology in toxicological studies. It was inspiring to see how this tech is opening up all these new possibilities for understanding and mitigating risks.
I'm seeing a pattern here, being
Yeah.
specific, showcasing your enthusiasm, and connecting your learning to the bigger picture of toxicology.
You got it. Remember, the interviewer wants to see that you're not just someone who knows the basics, but someone who's truly passionate about this field and dedicated to lifelong learning.
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Now, before we move on to the next question, I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier. RoleCatcher's AI can actually help you tailor your answers to specific job roles. So how does that work with a question like this?
So, it's all about analyzing that job description and identifying those keywords that align with the company's specific needs and priorities. So let's say the job description emphasizes regulatory toxicology. The AI might suggest mentioning your familiarity with specific guidelines, like those from the EPA or the FDA. It could also suggest highlighting any experience you have with preparing regulatory submissions or conducting risk assessments that meet those standards.
So the AI is helping you connect your passion for learning
Hmm.
to the specific requirements of the job, showing the interviewer that you're not just staying current generally,
Yeah.
but in a way that's relevant to their needs.
Exactly. It's all about making that connection
Yeah.
and showing your value to the company.
That's so cool. Okay, ready for question 3.
Yeah, let's hear it.
All right, this one gets into a core aspect of toxicology. Can you describe your experience with risk assessment? Now, I know risk assessment is a big part of a toxicologist's job. What are they really trying to understand with this question?
So with this question, the interviewer is trying to gauge your ability to go beyond just identifying hazards. They want to see if you can systematically analyze and evaluate potential risks. It's about understanding the process, weighing scientific data, considering exposure scenarios, and ultimately determining the likelihood and severity of any adverse effects.
Okay, so it's not enough to just say, yeah, I've done some risk assessments. What are some specifics that would really demonstrate your expertise?
For sure. You definitely want to mention specific types of risk assessments you've conducted. Have you done human health risk assessments, ecological risk assessments? What about occupational risk assessments? Mentioning these shows you understand the nuances of risk assessment in different situations.
Okay, so being specific of the types is key. What else?
Think about the methodologies you've used. Have you used EPA's IRIS database for hazard identification? Have you applied any specific risk assessment software? Those details demonstrate your familiarity with standard practices and tools.
Got it. So it's not just about having done them, but about understanding the how and the why behind those assessments.
Exactly. And remember, just like with those previous questions, think about how your experience aligns with that specific job description. If the role emphasizes environmental toxicology, focus on your experience with ecological risk assessments, for example.
Okay, I'm starting to see the pattern here.
Yeah.
Tailoring those answers is so crucial. Now, before we move on, how can RoleCatcher's AI help someone craft a strong response to this one?
RoleCatcher's AI is perfect for this. It analyzes that job description and suggests specific examples from your experience that are most relevant. So let's say the description mentions assessing the risk of pesticides to agricultural workers. The AI might suggest talking about a time you evaluated pesticide exposure pathways or calculated worker exposure levels, showing you have direct experience with what they need.
So it's like having a coach, guiding you to highlight the most important parts of your experience. Incredible. Okay, ready for question 4?
Yeah, hit me with it.
All right. This one is all about attention to detail. How do you ensure the validity and reliability of your data when conducting a toxicology study?
So with this one, it's all about showcasing your commitment to producing top quality, trustworthy data. It's about that scientific rigor.
Okay, so what are the absolute key points you'd want to hit in your answer?
Definitely highlight your understanding of good laboratory practices and quality control measures. Talk about how you calibrate instruments, validate methods, and use the right controls in your experiments. They want to see you're meticulous, that you get why those procedures are so important for reliable data.
So it's about showing that you understand why those procedures matter, not just that you follow them.
Exactly. And don't hesitate to get specific here. Mention particular techniques you use for quality assurance and quality control. You could say something like, I always run duplicate or triplicate samples to check reproducibility, and I regularly participate in proficiency testing programs to make sure my skills are sharp.
I like that. Those examples show you're walking the walk. When it comes to data quality,
Exactly. And once again, don't forget to tie your answer back to that job description. If they emphasize data analysis, you might mention specific software or statistical methods you use to really nail that data validity.
okay, tailoring the answer to the job description. Mantra. Got it. Now, before we move to the next one, how can RoleCatcher's AI help with a question like this?
It can be a huge help here. It analyzes the job description and suggests those examples from your experience that show your commitment to data quality. So, for example, if the job description mentions GLP compliance, the AI might suggest highlighting a time when you successfully implemented GLP procedures, or a time when you caught and fixed a data quality issue.
So it's all about connecting your experience to the specific requirements to make your answer even stronger.
Precisely, showcasing your skills in a way that really resonates.
Awesome. Okay. Ready for question 5?
Okay, bring it on.
All right, this one's a bit different. It's all about communication. Can you describe a time when you had to communicate complex toxicology information to a non-technical audience? Now, this skill seems super important, but what are they really getting at with this question?
This question is all about bridging that gap between the science and the real world, because often toxicologists have to explain complicated stuff to people who don't have a science background. Policymakers, people in the community, maybe even patients. So they want to know if you can break down the jargon, use clear language, and make those concepts easy to understand and relate to.
Okay, so it's not enough to just say, yeah, I'm good at explaining things.
Sure.
What kind of example would really showcase your communication skills?
Think about a time when you had to present complex information and make it engaging and accessible. Maybe you presented at a community meeting, or explain the risks of a chemical to a group of concerned citizens.
Okay, a real-world example where you had to make science make sense to non-scientists. What else?
Focus on how you made the information clear. Did you use analogies, visual aids, simple language? Did you check for understanding? Answer questions. Highlighting these techniques shows you're not just talking at people, but communicating with them.
Right, it's about making sure the audience gets it, not just being impressed by big words.
Exactly. And again, think about that specific job. If it involves a lot of public outreach or interaction with non-scientists, really highlight this part of your experience.
Okay, tailoring the answer, like a broken record at this point. But it's so important. Now, RoleCatcher has this cool AI feature that gives feedback on your answers. How could that be helpful for this kind of question?
It's super helpful. The AI analyzes your response and gives feedback on clarity, conciseness, and if you're using too much jargon, for example. If you're using too much technical language, it might suggest simpler words or offer analogies that would resonate better with a non-scientific audience.
It's like having a communication expert right there with you.
Precisely. It can even suggest ways to structure your response for maximum impact, making sure you hit all the key points and leave a strong impression.
That's really cool. Okay, ready for question 6?
Bring it on.
All right, this one gets to the heart of scientific methodology. How do you approach the design of a toxicology study? This feels like a real chance to show off your research skills.
It is. This question is all about showing you understand the scientific process and that you can design a study that's robust, ethical, and will get meaningful results.
Okay, so what are some things the interviewer is probably looking for?
Start by laying out the steps involved in designing a study. Talk about defining the research question, choosing the right animal model or in vitro system, selecting the right things to measure. Show them you understand the importance of a clear hypothesis and a good plan.
So, it's about being systematic, not just going into the lab and winging it.
Right. Exactly. And don't forget to mention ethical considerations. Talk about how you would ensure animal welfare, minimize animal use whenever possible, and stick to all the ethical guidelines. This shows you're not just a skilled scientist, but a responsible one too.
That's a really important point. Ethics are super important. What other details could make your answer stand out?
Think about the challenges of designing different types of studies. Like if you're designing an acute toxicity study, you'd need to think about the right dose range and exposure time to figure out those immediate effects. But if it's a chronic toxicity study, you'd need to consider longer-term exposure and potential cumulative effects. Those nuances show a deeper understanding of study design.
So you're adapting your approach based on what the study needs.
Exactly. And just like we've been talking about, connect your answer to that job description. If they focus on a particular type of study, highlight your experience with that specific type of design.
Okay, tailoring the answer. Getting it. Now, how can RoleCatcher's AI help with this one?
It's amazing for this. It can suggest specific study design elements that align with what the company needs. For example, if they mention the development of new drug candidates, the AI might suggest highlighting your experience with designing preclinical safety studies, showing the interviewer that your expertise matches their goals.
So cool. Taking your knowledge and showing it in a way that connects with their objectives.
Exactly, making those connections.
Yeah.
And demonstrating your value.
Okay. Ready for question 7?
Yep, let's hear it.
This one's all about problem solving. Can you describe a time when you had to troubleshoot an issue during a toxicology study? Everyone knows science doesn't always go as planned. So what are they really looking for here?
This question is all about your critical thinking skills and how you handle challenges in a scientific setting. They want to know if you can spot problems, figure out the root cause, and come up with effective solutions. It's all about showing your resourcefulness and your ability to think on your feet.
Okay. So more than just, yeah, I fixed problems in the lab, what kind of example would really showcase your skills?
Choose a specific time where you faced a tough challenge during a study. Clearly describe the problem, the steps you took to figure it out, and the solution you came up with.
So you're walking them through your thought process.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to get into the nitty-gritty details. Mention the techniques you used, the resources you consulted, any experiments you designed to pinpoint the problem. That shows a deeper understanding of the science behind it all.
It's showcasing your technical expertise and problem solving all in one.
Exactly. And like we've been talking about, tie it back to the job description. If they highlight independent work or troubleshooting, show them you can handle those challenges.
Tailoring the answer. I think I'm finally getting it. Relevance is key. Now, how can RoleCatcher's AI help with a question like this?
The AI can be a big help. It can help you structure your response to be clear and concise, highlighting those key steps in solving the problem. It can even suggest ways to emphasize skills relevant to the job. For example, if they mention analytical problem solving, the AI might suggest you highlight your ability to interpret data, identify patterns, or develop hypotheses.
It's like fine-tuning your answer to really showcase what matters most for the role.
Exactly, making that connection and showing you're the right fit.
Love it. Okay, ready for question 8?
Yep, bang on.
This one is all about juggling. Can you discuss a time when you had to prioritize multiple toxicology projects? I imagine this is a pretty common scenario.
Oh, absolutely. Time management is so important in science, especially in a field as demanding as toxicology. This question is about showcasing your ability to handle all those competing priorities, meet deadlines, and stay organized under pressure.
Okay, so how do you show off those multitasking superpowers? What are the key things to highlight?
Start with a specific situation where you were juggling a bunch of projects. It could be research studies, regulatory submissions, even internal reports. Then walk them through how you prioritized everything. Did you use a to-do list? Project management software? Did you delegate tasks? Highlight your strategies for staying on top of it all.
So it's not just saying you can multitask. It's about showing how you do it effectively.
Exactly. And don't forget the outcomes. Did you meet all those deadlines? Was the work high quality? Showing that you get results even when things are crazy will impress them.
Okay, it's managing your time, A&D, getting things done. So important.
It is. And as always, think about that job description. If it involves a lot of project management or independent work, show them you can handle those multiple priorities.
Okay, tailoring the answer.
Yes.
Seeing the importance more and more with each question. Now, how can RoleCatcher's AI help with this one?
The AI is fantastic for this. It can analyze the job description and suggest examples from your experience that highlight your time management skills. For example, if the job description mentions meeting tight deadlines or handling competing priorities, the AI might suggest highlighting a time you managed a complex project under pressure or a time you had to reprioritize tasks to meet a critical deadline.
It's all about making those connections to the specific language and requirements.
Precisely. Showcasing your skills in a way that resonates.
All right. Ready for question 9, our final question in this set.
Bring it on.
Okay. This one is all about the rules. How do you ensure that your toxicology work complies with regulatory requirements? Now, I know this field is highly regulated, so what are they really getting at with this one?
They want to see you understand the regulatory landscape, and that you're committed to ethical and compliant practices. They need to know you take safety and compliance seriously, and that you have the knowledge and skills to navigate all those regulations.
So it's not just, yes, I follow the rules. What kind of answer really knocks it out of the park?
Show them you're familiar with those key regulatory agencies and guidelines. Mention the EPA, the FDA, OSHA. Whichever ones are relevant to the job, you need to show you understand the hierarchy of regulations and how they apply to toxicological research.
So it's about seeing the big picture of the rules.
Exactly. And don't just name drop agencies. Give specific examples of how you've incorporated those requirements into your work. Have you prepared reports for regulatory submissions? Designed studies that meet those guidelines? Conducted audits to ensure compliance? These details show you've got practical experience.
It's putting those rules into practice.
Precisely. And as always, connect it back to that job description. If the role involves lots of regulatory work, highlight your expertise there.
Tailoring the answer. It's like the golden rule of interview prep. Now, how can RoleCatcher's AI help craft a response for this one?
It's amazing for this. It can pinpoint specific regulations or compliance procedures that are especially relevant. For example, if the job description mentions GLP compliance, the AI might suggest you highlight a time you successfully implemented GLP procedures, or a time you found and fixed a compliance issue.
It's all about making those connections to the job requirements.
Exactly, showing your skills and experience in a way that really makes an impact.
Awesome. Okay, we've made it through those 9 tough questions. Before we move on to some career insights from RoleCatcher's Guide, what really stands out to you about these questions, and how to approach them effectively?
What stands out to me is how important it is to go beyond just reciting what you've done. It's about really thinking about what they're trying to figure out and tailoring your answers to show the skills and experience that matter most for the job. Give concrete examples, highlight how you solve problems, and show your passion for this field. That's what makes you stand out.
Great advice. It's not just about what you know. It's about how you present yourself.
Exactly. And remember, RoleCatcher's AI features can be a game changer, helping you fine-tune those responses.
Absolutely. Okay, let's shift gears a bit now and dive into some career insights from RoleCatcher's Guide. This guide is packed with information about toxicology, career paths, tips for success, ready to unlock some wisdom.
Absolutely. Let's see what we can find. I'm ready. It's always interesting to see what's happening out there career-wise.
Me too. One thing that really jumped out at me was the job outlook that RoleCatcher highlighted. They're saying demand for toxicologists is going to grow like way faster than average over the next decade.
That's awesome to hear, especially for anyone thinking about going into this field. It makes sense, though. I mean, everyone's more aware of environmental risks these days, so we need more people who can assess and deal with those risks.
Exactly. And it's not just general demand either. RoleCatcher actually breaks it down by specialization. So, for example, they say environmental toxicology is a particularly hot area right now, with all the focus on pollution and its impact on ecosystems.
Yeah, definitely. That lines up with everything we're seeing in the news and in research. Sustainability is huge right now, and toxicologists are like right at the forefront of tackling those problems.
It's exciting to think about being a part of something so important. Now, RoleCatcher also talks about specific skills that are valuable for toxicologists.
Yeah.
And I was surprised by how much they emphasize communication skills alongside all that scientific expertise.
Oh yeah, that's so key. Because it's one thing to understand the science yourself, but being able to explain it to others, that's a whole other skill set. Whether you're talking to policymakers,
Right.
presenting research to colleagues, or just explaining risks to the public, communication is essential.
I'm really seeing that now, how those communication skills are important at every part of a toxicologist's work. It's like that question we talked about earlier, about explaining complex info to a non-technical audience.
Exactly. You're constantly putting those communication skills to the test.
And RoleCatcher actually gives some great tips for improving those skills. They suggest practicing presentations, attending workshops on science communication, even joining Toastmasters to build confidence.
Those are all great ideas. It's a good reminder that communication is a skill you can learn and improve.
Totally. Like any other skill.
Ah.
Now, speaking of improving skills, RoleCatcher also has this cool AI feature that can help with communication.
Oh yeah, it's really helpful. What it does is it analyzes your writing and your speaking and gives you feedback on how clear you are, if you're being concise, or if you're using too much jargon. It can even help you adjust your style for different audiences.
It's like having a personal communication coach. All right, let's shift gears a bit and talk about career paths. I thought the section in RoleCatcher's Guide about the different stages of a toxicologist's career was really interesting. It's helpful to see that progression and understand how you can grow in this field.
I agree. It's inspiring to see how you can start at an entry level
Hmm.
and then move up to more senior positions with more responsibility.
Right. And RoleCatcher actually gives examples of job titles and responsibilities at each level. Like they mentioned that an entry-level toxicologist might assist with research projects, collect data, prepare reports.
Yeah, and then a senior toxicologist might lead those teams, design and run complex studies, provide expert testimony, or even influence policy decisions.
It's amazing how much room for growth and specialization there is.
It really is. And RoleCatcher emphasizes that you have to keep learning to move up. They recommend getting advanced degrees, attending conferences, getting certifications to keep building your knowledge and skills.
Oh, that reminds me of that question we talked about earlier. How do you stay up to date with the latest developments? It's not just about what you know NLW, but about showing you're committed to learning more.
Absolutely. It shows you're not just content with where you are, you're pushing yourself to learn and grow in this field.
And I love that RoleCatcher's AI can help you answer that question too, suggesting resources and research areas relevant to the job.
It's like having a personal career advisor, helping you stay ahead of the curve.
Totally. Okay, let's talk about something that's always on people's minds. Salary expectations. RoleCatcher gives some good info about this.
Yeah, they mentioned that experience, education, location, industry. All of that plays a role in how much you can make, and they give some helpful salary range data so you can get a realistic idea of what to expect.
That's super helpful to know, especially when you're negotiating a job offer.
Absolutely. And they even have tips for negotiating a good salary, like researching what other people are making in similar roles, highlighting your unique skills, and being ready to walk away if the offer isn't good enough.
All important points. Knowing your worth is key in any job search. Now, before we move on, I'm wondering, how can RoleCatcher's AI help with salary negotiations?
It can be a huge help. What it does is it analyzes your skills and experience and your location to give you personalized estimates based on what's happening in the market. It can also help you build a strong argument for your salary expectations, highlighting your accomplishments and what you bring to the table.
It's like having a negotiation coach in your pocket. That's so cool. Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about what it's actually like to be a toxicologist. RoleCatcher's Guide gives some interesting insights into the day-to-day work.
Yeah, I was really interested in their description of the different environments you can work in. It's not just labs. You could be out in the field collecting samples, working for a government agency on regulations, even testifying in court as an expert witness.
Wow, that's a lot of variety.
It is, and they give specific examples of what you might be doing, like conducting tests, analyzing data, writing reports, giving presentations, developing safety protocols, even educating the public about hazards.
It sounds like a really intellectually stimulating career
Yeah.
and one that's always changing. Now, before we move on, I want to touch on something we talked about earlier,
Yeah.
showing off your technical skills during the interview.
Oh, yeah, that's essential. They need to see that you have the skills to do the job.
And RoleCatcher gives some good advice for that. They say you should know how to use common lab equipment, brush up on analytical methods, and be ready to talk about your experience with software.
It's all about showing you have that foundation to be successful.
And RoleCatcher's AI can help you figure out which technical skills are most important for the job.
Exactly. Helping you focus on the right things.
Okay, now let's talk about something that's becoming more and more important in toxicology. Using alternative methods to reduce or replace animal testing. RoleCatcher has a whole section on this.
It's a really important topic, and it's great that they're addressing it. We need to minimize animal use in research, and toxicologists are leading the way in finding alternatives.
Totally. And they don't just talk about it generally. They give specific examples of alternative methods, like in vitro testing, computer modeling, even human cell-based systems.
That's great, because it shows you're aware of the ethical side of things, and that you know about the scientific advances that are changing how toxicology is done.
Right. It's about being a skilled A&D responsible scientist. Now, how can RoleCatcher's AI help someone talk about these alternative methods during an interview?
It's a great tool for that. It can look at the job description and suggest alternative methods that are relevant to the company's work. So if they mention reducing animal testing, the AI might suggest highlighting your experience with in vitro toxicology or computational methods.
So it's about connecting your knowledge to what the company cares about.
Exactly. Showing them that you share their values.
Love that.
Yeah.
Okay, let's shift gears again and talk about networking. RoleCatcher's Guide makes it clear that networking is key in any field, but especially in a specialized area like toxicology.
Oh, absolutely. Networking is all about relationships, expanding your knowledge, and hearing about opportunities. And in toxicology, collaborations and connections can lead to major breakthroughs.
Right. And RoleCatcher gives some practical networking tips, like going to conferences, joining professional organizations, connecting with people on LinkedIn.
Those are all great ideas. Conferences are fantastic for learning about new research, meeting experts, and even presenting your own work. Professional organizations offer networking opportunities, continuing education, and even job boards. And LinkedIn is great for connecting with people, sharing what you know, and staying up to date.
So many resources out there to help you build your network.
There really are. And RoleCatcher doesn't just list them. They give specific tips for making the most of those opportunities, like being proactive, reaching out to people, and building those genuine connections.
It's not just about finding a job, though. It's about building relationships, learning from others, and staying informed.
Totally. It's an investment in your career.
Now, how can RoleCatcher's AI help with networking?
I'm glad you asked. The AI can actually identify important people in your field, analyze their expertise, and even give you talking points to start conversations.
That's awesome, like having a personal networking assistant.
Exactly. The more you network, the more you learn, the more connections you make, the more opportunities you have.
Okay, let's talk about research now. Not the science kind, but researching the company and the job you're interviewing for. RoleCatcher really emphasizes how important this is.
It's so important because it shows them you're really interested and that you've taken the time to learn about the company.
Right. And it goes beyond just showing interest. You can actually use that research to tailor your answers.
Exactly. You can show them how your skills connect with their goals, and that makes you a better fit.
It's all about showing your value. Now, RoleCatcher gives some tips for doing company research, like checking their website, reading their annual reports, even looking at their social media.
All great places to start. You can also look at Glassdoor to see what current and former employees say. That gives you a sense of the company culture.
It's not just about facts and figures, though. It's about getting a feel for their mission and values.
Right, so you can talk about why you're drawn to them.
And how you fit in.
It's about finding that connection.
Now, how can RoleCatcher's AI help with company research?
It's amazing for this. It can analyze their online presence and pull together key information like their mission, their values, their projects, even their hiring trends. It can also find key people in the company and give you insights into their background and expertise.
It's like having a research assistant working for you.
Exactly. The more you know, the better you can prepare.
Totally. Okay, now let's talk about first impressions. RoleCatcher dedicates a whole section of this because it's so important to present yourself professionally.
First impressions are hugely. They set the tone for the whole interview.
RoleCatcher gives some practical advice, like dressing professionally, being on time, and having copies of your resume ready.
Those are the basics, but they show respect and that you care about the opportunity.
And body language matters too.
Yeah.
Eye contact, good posture, a firm handshake.
Absolutely. It's all about confidence and professionalism. And don't forget to smile. It makes everyone feel more comfortable.
Great tips. It's a reminder that how you act is just as important as what you say.
Totally. You want to make a good impression?
Now, how can RoleCatcher's AI help with this?
You can actually use it to analyze video recordings. It'll give you feedback on your body language, your facial expressions, your overall presentation.
That's really cool, like having your own image consultant.
Exactly. And remember, practice makes perfect.
Okay, let's talk about something that can be a bit stressful. Behavioral interview questions. You know those questions that ask you to describe a time you did something?
RoleCatcher has a great framework for these. The STAR method.
Situation,
Yeah.
task, action, result.
It's such a helpful way to structure your answers.
So you give them all the info they need.
Right.
And RoleCatcher gives examples of behavioral questions and walks you through how to use the STAR method. They also remind you to choose examples that are relevant to the job.
That's key. It's about showing them why you're the right person for this job.
And don't forget, RoleCatcher's AI can help you polish those STAR responses.
It can give you feedback on how clear and concise you are and how well your examples connect to the job description.
Okay, now let's talk about something that a lot of people forget, asking questions at the end of the interview. RoleCatcher has a whole section on this.
Asking questions is so important. It shows them you're engaged, curious, and that you take initiative.
RoleCatcher even provides a list of questions you can ask about the company culture, their future plans, the responsibilities of the role, and professional development opportunities.
All good topics. And remember to tailor your questions to the specific company and role.
It shows you've done your research.
Right.
And it's not just about getting info. It's about keeping the conversation going,
Building that rapport.
leaving a good impression.
It shows you're not just sitting there passively, you're an active participant.
Now, how can RoleCatcher's AI help with this?
It's great for this. It can analyze the company and suggest questions that are relevant to their work and values. It can also help you identify things you want to learn more about.
Like a personal interview strategist.
Think so.
Okay, let's talk about one last thing. Following up after the interview. RoleCatcher says it's super important to send a thank you note.
Absolutely. It's professional,
Yeah.
courteous, and it reminds them of the good impression you made.
RoleCatcher has tips for writing good thank you notes. Send it within 24 hours. Mention things you talked about in the interview. And say you're still excited about the job.
All good advice. It's not just a formality. It's a chance to keep the conversation going.
And to remind them of your strengths.
And it shows you're serious about the opportunity.
Now, can RoleCatcher's AI help with this?
It can. It can analyze your interview answers and suggest things to highlight in your note.
That's amazing, like a writing assistant.
It helps you create a note that's professional and personalized.
Okay, we've covered so much today. Career paths, salaries, day-to-day work, first impressions. Following up, what are some of the biggest things that stood out to you about toxicology and what RoleCatcher has to offer?
I think what's most impressive is how broad and deep this field is. It's so much more than just working in a lab. It's about understanding how substances affect living things. It's about protecting people and the environment. It's about using science to make the world a better place. And RoleCatcher captures all of that. They give you amazing insights, practical advice, and these cool AI tools to help you succeed in your career.
I totally agree. RoleCatcher has been such a great guide for us today. I definitely encourage everyone listening to check out their resources. They really do have a ton to offer. And speaking of all that toxicology has to offer, they also highlighted some cool specializations within the field.
Yeah. There are so many different paths you can take. It just depends what you're interested in. Like we talked about environmental toxicology, but there's also occupational toxicology, forensic toxicology, food toxicology. So many options.
It's amazing how much variety there is.
Yeah.
What advice does RoleCatcher give for someone trying to pick a specialization?
They say explore what you're passionate about. Do some research. Even talk to toxicologists working in those areas. They also say think about your strengths. Like if you're really good at analytical chemistry, you might enjoy a specialization with lots of lab work. Or if you love public health, you could look into regulatory toxicology or risk assessment.
That's helpful. Finding that sweet spot where your interests and skills meet.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be a forever decision. You can always try different things throughout your career.
Okay, now let's talk about gaining experience, which is obviously super important when you're starting out. RoleCatcher has some tips for building your resume.
They recommend internships, research assistant positions, volunteering at labs or environmental organizations. Those give you hands-on experience, help you network, and give you things to talk about in interviews.
All great suggestions. It's about being proactive.
And showing you're serious about this field. And even small things can help, like if you volunteered at a science museum or helped with an environmental project. Those show your interest in science, your teamwork skills, your willingness to pitch in.
It's all about connecting those experiences to the career.
Showing them how you're prepared.
Okay, one last thing I wanted to touch on. Continuous learning and professional development. RoleCatcher talks about this a lot.
Yeah, toxicology is always changing. There are always new discoveries, new technologies, new regulations, so you got to stay up to date.
And RoleCatcher has a ton of resources for that.
Yeah.
Conferences, courses, professional organizations.
All great ways to keep learning and growing. And it's not just about staying current. It's also about branching out, exploring new interests, taking on challenges.
I like that, keeping that curiosity going.
Exactly. Lifelong learning is key to a successful career.
Okay, we've talked about so much today. Interview questions, career paths, salaries, practical tips. As we wrap up, what are your final thoughts? What should our listeners take away from all of this?
I think the most important thing is that prepping for a toxicology interview is about more than just memorizing things. It's about showing your passion for this field, your understanding of the science, your ability to think critically and solve problems, your commitment to doing things the right way. It's about showing them what you bring to the table.
It's about showing them who you are.
Exactly. And remember, RoleCatcher is an amazing resource for all of this. They can help you with everything, from researching companies to crafting great answers to practicing your skills. They can really help you land your dream job.
I totally agree. RoleCatcher has been so helpful for us today. Everyone listening should definitely check them out. All right, that wraps up our deep dive into toxicology interview prep. Hope you found it informative, insightful, and inspiring.
I hope you feel ready to go out there and ace those interviews and start an amazing career in this field.
Thanks for joining us. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep making a difference in the world.